Okay, so why are we here? Why are we talking about transportation? Mobility has everything to do with opportunity. It has to do with how do you get to jobs? How do you get to amenities? How do you live your life? It's super fundamental. How many people in this room used public transportation to get here today? And I'm not going to shame anyone. Excellent. Okay. How many people would have if it weren't raining? That was an honest answer. Thank you. Transportation has to do with housing, it has to do with climate, it has to do with equity. It's fundamental to so much what we do. So that's why we wanted to have this conversation today. And the first thing I want to start with is just a couple of stories from some of our community members. And I want to start with some of our friends from Rise South City, which is one of the organizations that we work very closely with. And if you guys all want to just come up at the same time and you can just take turns at the microphone and just tell us short stories of how public transportation affects you and your opportunities. Sorry. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marta Ortega. I'm here for Rise City. Mi experiencia personal en el transporte es pésima, porque nunca los buses llegan cuando tienen que llegar, sobre todo el 397 que muchas personas utilizan en la madrugada para ir a sus empleos, y siempre llega tarde o simplemente nunca llega. Cuando se llama por teléfono a Samtrans o a la organización que dependen, se dicen, mande una carta, pero honestamente nuestra comunidad no son de las personas que manden una carta. Si se está llamando por teléfono, se está dando una queja, yo creo que deben de considerar más a los empleados, sobre todo los que se levantan en la madrugada para llegar a un empleo o simplemente por tomar un bus para llegar a tiempo a algún lugar.
Hello, my name is Marta Ortega. In my experience taking the bus, it's been very difficult because the buses either arrive late or they just do not arrive, and it is difficult to get to where I need to go. And if I need to call them or something, they always have like excuses, and or they send a letter or put a complaint. But unfortunately, our community, it's not a community that will go ahead and do that. They will just basically look for different options, and that's a difficult task to do.
Inclusive soy parte de la comunidad y he participado en encuestas que se han hecho para Samtrans a la comunidad. Y una vez me tocó subirme a un bus para preguntarle que si nos daba permiso de preguntarle a los pasajeros que tenía, y me dijo, no, ya me tengo que ir. Si ya de antemano tienen una forma de que todo lo veamos mal, la conducta de este chofer dejó mucho que decir.
I form a part of a community who has always worked with the community and outreach, and we have done surveys, and I got out on a bus once and asked the driver if I could have some of the people taking the bus to participate, and they said, no, I have to go. So she expresses that how if this is something that they already expecting, how are they responding like this, and how are we supposed to feel as a community?
Gracias.
Thank you.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es María González. Yo vivo en East Palo Alto y siento que el servicio de transporte es muy malo. Igual siempre llega tarde. Aparte, yo creo que necesitamos más rutas a diferentes destinos. Nuestra comunidad pertenece al condado de San Mateo. Cuando tenemos que ir, que nos mandan a terapias hasta el hospital de San Mateo, siempre se tiene que estar transportando camiones. No hay un camión directo que nos lleve. Esto nos hace perder mucho tiempo. Primero esperando el primer bus, yendo a Stanford, o yendo hasta Roebuck City a transbordar otro bus y esperar hasta que salga. Se pierden mucho tiempo, muchas horas, y pienso que tiene que haber otro tipo de servicio que nos lleve a otros destinos, o sea, no nomás es a Red Auxilio o a Palo Alto, necesitamos también ir como a Mountain View, y es muy importante que haya un bus que nos lleve tan solo al hospital, que toda la comunidad de ahí pertenecemos al hospital de San Mateo, y siempre se nos dificulta ir a nuestro destino. Muchas gracias.
Hello, I'm Maria Gonzalez. Gomez? Gonzalez, I'm sorry. And I belong to the community of the county of San Mateo, and it is always very difficult, as Martha mentioned. The buses are always late. She lives in Palo Alto, and there is also a need for different routes, because not all the routes take them to where they need to go. And when they need to go to when they have like doctor's appointment and they have to get to like San Mateo General Hospital, it is always difficult to get there, because a lot of the times they get sent to other areas like Mountain View, Redwood City, and it is difficult to navigate through the different routes that they need to use to get to where they need to go. And also it is difficult because when the appointments are set, then there is times when they arrive late, and then they get to the appointments, and then they have to reschedule because their appointments have already passed. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Rosa Adame, and I'm working with the community and outreach, and also when my compañera told, everybody say the bus is late, it's not on time, and I need to more like drivers getting time on the community, because I experience with the people like they frustrate about the time, Thank you so much for your time.
Hi, everybody. My name is Andres Garcia. So I'm normally don't use public transportation because my wife, Rosa, most beautiful woman in the world, she's an angel to me. She drives me everywhere. I'm a cancer survivor, so I have to go to Stanford really often. She drives me always. I'm not able to drive. My driver license was suspended. But I'm a teacher, guitar teacher in Casa Círculo. So when I have to use public transportation, I find it really nice for me because I'm able to go there with no problem. That's my experience, Thanks.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Araceli Agustín y estoy aquí para dar mi experiencia como usuaria del bus, que la verdad, aunque vuelva uno a recaer en lo mismo, el bus siempre llega tarde, no llega a tiempo, y si se atrasa y se junta con el otro, van haciendo tiempo nos atrasan mucho, porque a veces hay ocasiones en que se han juntado al mismo tiempo dos buses y uno al otro van, no van echando carreras, sino van atrasando un poco más el tiempo para así justificar su llegada a la base, y es mucho problema para los usuarios. Aquí en este país no es como porque yo soy de México. En México hay demasiados transportes para todos lados y porque la gente no tiene carro propio. Pero aquí a veces los carros no es que queramos tener carros o queremos andar manejando. A mí no me gusta manejar, pero yo manejo por necesidad, porque las distancias están muy lejos, mis trabajos, y aparte de todo el tiempo que se pierde en llegar de un lado a otro, porque a veces pues los choferes pues tal vez tengan que tener llegar a cierto momento, no sé qué es lo que pase, pero a mí me ha pasado de que hasta me han bajado del bus donde voy para subirme en el que viene atrás porque ya se juntaron los dos tiempos. Y cuando agarran el bus que va de la Middlefield hacia Palo Alto, como a las 4 de la mañana, ese bus nunca pasa ese horario. Siempre pasa más tarde. Nunca ha llegado ese horario. está en el sketch, pero uno va ahí y lo está esperando y hasta se está congelando porque no hay bus. Gracias. Esa es mi experiencia.
Okay, I'm gonna try to translate the best that I can because that was very fast. But she says it sounds redundant, but it's the same thing. You know, the bus is often late, and then when they need to, you know, that there's times that she has to go and wait, and then the bus is late, and then there's another one right behind it. So then there's two buses collapsing, you know, one after another, and now they have to like. For some reason they wait and they slow down because I don't know if they have to get there at a certain time or they have to make time for the other bus. And then there has been times where she has been taken off the bus and sent to the other bus behind it. She doesn't understand the reason why, but there's also, she has had the experience, she works at 5 o'clock in the morning, and sometimes she's taking the bus at 4 o'clock in the morning on Mirfield in Redwood City, and she says that bus is always late, and it's very hard because it's cold and they're freezing, and the bus is always late. Like there's no explanation or no reason, they just always late. And unfortunately, it's not like they're gonna tell them why the reason is. And then also she says it is not like in my country because, you know, and she's like she says she's from Mexico, and in Mexico they have tons of public transportation because unfortunately the people don't always have the means to have a car, so therefore they rely on public transportation. However, here relying on public transportation is very difficult because it's not, they don't have enough to go the different routes. And she explains she doesn't particularly like to drive, but she feels she has to because of the difficulty using public transportation.
Thank you so much for everyone who gave their testimony, and to Francesca for translating on the fly. We have one more. Oh. Thank you all for sharing your experiences. We have one more person who's not from Rice South City, but is actually one of the AmeriCorps Vistas who's here this year. Lily?
Hi, my name is Lily Heicher. I live in North Fair Oaks. I am very privileged to have a car that's reliable, but I choose to take public transport and ride my bike just about everywhere. I grew up in Georgia, where there is no good public transport, no buses in the outside of the city, and our BART system is terrible. So coming here was very exciting for me to be able to get places without using my car. I find that living in North Fair Oaks, it's very just disjointed in that area. I took the bus today because I didn't want to ride in the rain, and I had to walk a half mile to the bus stop. And it's going to cost me about $20 round trip to get from here back home. And I think there's the issue in my area is ridership. Because I'm on the border of Atherton, nobody in Atherton or in Menlo Park uses the transportation when it could be more accessible if more people did utilize it. It could bring down costs and just make it overall more efficient. But there's no incentive to get people to ride the trains or take buses. I think most people are either intimidated to do it or just don't think it's as accessible as it could be, or that it takes too long overall, especially with the weekend shutdowns, unfortunately. But overall, I'm really grateful for the options that we do have. Thank you.
Thank you, Lily. And we have a surprise guest. Sorry, introduce yourself.
My name is Gina Pappen, and I'm on the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. And I want to say muchas gracias for speaking today. And I would love to find out where they take the bus, because what you're speaking is so important to us, because Adina and I have been working long and hard to make sure the buses are on time. All of transit is coordinated. So it means a lot that you are here and that you are speaking. So very much. Muchas gracias.
One of the reasons we actually wanted to start with the community members is I think one of, sorry, I don't remember which one of you, but somebody said, it's like, when you reach out to SamTrans, they say write a letter or make a formal complaint, and that's not something that your community is used to doing. So we're hoping that this is more of a platform where you feel comfortable. Thank you, Francesca, for bringing the community to really be able to have this conversation in a way that maybe is more comfortable than some of the other ways. So with that, I want to introduce our speakers today. So we have Super David Canepa, Supervisor. That was terrible. We have Superman, David Canepa here. We're very honored to have him here. He is on the MTC, he's on the SamTrans board. He has a tremendous force for good in our county, and we really appreciate all of the work he's done and wanted him to have the opportunity to address some of these. After that, we'll be turning it over to Laura Tolkoff, who's the Transportation Director for SPUR, and Adina Levin, who's here, and is the Policy Director for Seamless Bay Area. So with that, I will turn it over to Supervisor Canepa.
Buenas tardes. Mi nombre es David Canepa. You know, I think it's really important that you came. When my grandmother came from Hermosillo, Mexico, she was in South San Francisco. So that's muy importante. So I think one of the things I think about is the voyage, right? I just got on SamTrans 2 months ago. So one of the things that I thought about, this goes back about a year ago, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, was that in that community, the elders had wanted a bus shelter. And the reason they had wanted a bus shelter was because of the conditions in the rain. Now I was, I'm supervisor at Petra, but it took our office, I want to recognize my staff member, Tony Bayudan. It took us a long time to get a bus shelter. When it comes to language and language access, it is extremely important that we communicate, whether it's Espanol, whatever it is, Cantonese, Mandarin. The county is changing for the good. And if we're not able to provide access to language, there's a fundamental problem. And if you're not being heard, I'm gonna give you my cell phone number, okay? It's 415-513-9410. You call me anytime if there are any issues. I might have to be SamTrans' new operator, but I will promise we will get you the response you deserve. And no one should have to wait for buses. We all can improve when it comes to public transit. So I'm gonna ask you to indulge me. I have some very prepared comments. We know there's more work to do. We agree? Lots of work to do. What I'm gonna talk about is I'm gonna talk about what I'm doing around MTC, talk about a little about SamTrans, and then we're gonna do a question and answer session. So just read from my prepared comments. I really want to thank Georgia Faruqi. Stand up, Georgia. I want to thank you for your leadership. I think Thrive Alliance, Petra, you are really a force for good. I remember when we first got engaged and involved, it was probably not the best partner, but you've really changed the paradigm. Your work speaks for itself. I'm going to make sure I can watch some of the Zoom programs. So the question is, the fundamental question on transportation is, how did we get there? As you know, I serve on both the SamTrans Board of Directors, and I'm the new chair of the MTC Legislative Committee. These two agencies are keenly focused on equity, and I will highlight some of the programs in place to improve the accessibility and affordability for public transit and some of the potential obstacles. Firstly, we know for most households in the Bay Area, transportation is the third biggest monthly expense. That's behind housing and food. When public transit is out of reach, access to the community, the grocery store, healthcare, jobs, and education cannot be realized. How can we ensure that transit fares remain affordable for the region's low-income residents. At MTC, thank you, Commissioner Pappen, we created the Blue Ribbon Transit Recovery Task Force in 2020 to set a path for the transit system's recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. The task force helped guide MTC's regional response to the pandemic in 3 areas: assisting in the distribution of federal coronavirus relief funds, guiding transit agencies' recovery planning, and identifying the actions needed to bring transit back for customers in a way that would be responsive and better suited to their riding needs. This work culminated in the Bay Area Transit Transformation Action Plan. 27 near-term actions to be taken by MTC, transit agencies, county transportation agencies, and others to make the Bay Area's public transportation network more connected, more efficient, and most importantly, more customer focused. The action plan focuses on actions to be taken within the next 3 years in 5 areas: fares and payment, mapping and wayfinding, transit network, accessibility, and funding that are needed to begin to transform a vulnerable network into an improved system that attracts many more users. Work is already underway, such as with the launch of Clipper Start, a pilot program that offers reduced fares for low-income riders. Clipper Bay Pass, a 2-year pilot program to study the impact of a single pass that will provide some 50,000 Bay Area residents free access to bus, rail, and ferry services in the 9-county region. Federal relief funds delivered a combined total of $4.4 billion for Bay Area transit agencies. Thanks to these resources, transit agencies sustained service for essential workers and avoided layoffs. Bay Area transit agencies are making strides in attracting riders back to transit and adapting to serve riders' needs in a post-COVID world. But current transit ridership remains at only 53% of pre-pandemic levels. But we know federal funds have provided just a temporary lifeline. This might be the most important message you should hear from me today. Federal funds are running out, and state gap funding is needed, while transit agencies retool and develop new strategies for long-term financial sustainability. We say it again, we can't afford to lose transit. That's why state funding for transit operations is vitally needed. This year, MTC is working very closely with the transit agencies to secure funding for transit operations so that Bay Area riders aren't confronted with massive service cuts and fare increases that will completely decimate the transit service we have today and would be incredibly difficult to recover from. MTC and the region's transit agencies, along with a strong coalition of business groups, labor organizations, environmental groups, transit advocates, and others, are calling, this is where we need your help, everyone's help, upon the legislator to provide a multi-year commitment of state funds for transit operations, which would help fund the Transit Transformation Action Plan and ensure transit in the Bay Area thrives. Without a multi-year commitment of state funds, some Bay Area operators are at risk of having to make severe cuts that would deny access to work, school, healthcare, and other daily needs to hundreds of thousands of residents each day. A strong public transit system underpins California's ability to deliver an equitable and climate-friendly future. Transit is a lifeline for the Bay Area's low-income residents, as well as many persons with disabilities and older adults. Transit riders also have disproportionately more likely to be people of color. Having a reliable and affordable transit system is foundational to advancing equity in our region and in our state. At Samtrans, the demographics of our riders are 90% of white riders qualify as low income, and 64% being extremely low income. Samtrans rolled out Reimagine Samtrans, a comprehensive reset of our bus route network in 2022. Reimagine Samtrans planning process includes extensive multilingual public outreach. Our new network focuses on serving those who depend on public transit most. We concentrate in providing service in the equity priority areas. One of the guiding principles for designing our network is to provide transportation that supports social equity. We have a number of discounted fare programs. Youth Unlimited, launched in 2022, provides free bus fares for socioeconomically disadvantaged elementary and high school students. I believe that program has about 20,000 participants now. Samtrans also participates in Clipper Start, and are only a handful of transit agencies in the Bay Area that provide 50% discounts on our riders for income qualifying adults. Probably one of the most important things for Samtrans. We are very fortunate at the County Transit Authority and Samtrans for Measure W, approved by voters in 2019, which generates approximately $90 to $95 million a year. Measure W allows us to invest in a financially sustainable public transportation system that increases ridership. We do a lot to advance accessibility and affordability in transportation in San Mateo County, but we have to continue to try to improve equity in our transportation system. As you know, the Express Lanes project on Highway 101 is active now. I'm not sure how many of you feel about the tolls, but I was hesitant to support the project initially over the equity issues. But I'm proud to say that San Mateo County Express Lanes Joint Power Authority has created the first express lane equity program in the Bay Area to improve equity outcomes for low-income households, which I fought hard when I served on CCAG. The equity program offers $100 Clipper cards for transit trips or $100 fast train transponders for discounted trips on the express lanes. To date, over 1,500 San Mateo County residents have received the benefit. There are multiple shuttle lines that are funded by CCAG and the TA, and often offered by local cities and/or commute.org. In San Mateo County, all of these publicly funded shuttles are public access shuttles that all members of the public can ride and are not limited to particular employees. Our greatest challenge, and this has been 15 years in politics, is the last mile connection. We need to create more seamless connections to our transit stations. CCAG and several cities are working on shared micro mobility programs that would sponsor shared e-bike programs that would include equity programs to ensure that the shared e-bikes are available to low-income riders. CCAG is currently advancing shared e-bike pilots in Redwood City, Daly City, and Broadmoor. But as I stated earlier, the major challenge is the fiscal cliff that all transit operators are facing. In the coming years, Bay Area transit operators, including our local ones, will face funding reductions that will significantly hamper our ability to continue to provide the transit service we need to meet the needs of our commuters, improve equity, and help us to meet our environmental and GHG reduction goals. Finally, that's why it's important that the legislator and Governor Newsom must provide a multi-year commitment of state funds for transit operations. Because without a multi-year commitment of state funds, some Bay Area operators are at risk of having to make severe cuts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Superman Canepa. Sorry, we just have to go with that at least for today. You brought up a lot of points that we're going to get some more detail on now from Laura and from Adina, and then I'm really looking forward to the question and answer. I think it's going to be good. So Laura and Adina, I'll send it over to you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. Oh,
Laura's online. She's right behind you on the
screen.
We cannot, I think Laura's trying to talk and cannot hear Laura. How do we make that happen?
I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Okay, Laura is trying to talk.
Okay. Now try.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I hear myself, so that seems to have worked. I'm assuming that somebody will be showing the slides and advancing them in the room.
Yes.
Okay. There we are. Okay, well, thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Laura Tolkoff. I'm the Transportation Policy Director for SPUR. For those of you who don't know SPUR, we are a member-supported nonprofit public policy organization that focuses on creating more sustainable, equitable, and prosperous Bay Area. And we do that through research, education, and advocacy. And I'm here today with our colleague, Adina Levin. We will be talking a little bit more about what Supervisor Canepa was talking about, the transit fiscal cliff, and explaining the work that our groups are doing in coalition with many others throughout the state to push for operating funding from the state legislature and the governor this year, as well as funding to help regrow ridership and improve the quality of public transit. Sorry, I just knocked my charger out. So thank you again for inviting SPUR to speak. We're really happy to be here, and I really appreciate the stories that we heard earlier today. They certainly resonate very strongly with me and really helps root the work that we do here at SPUR. So thank you for sharing that earlier. So I'll just jump in here. As I mentioned, we're here talking about a campaign that we're calling the Survive and Thrive campaign. We are part of a pro-equity multi-sector civic coalition, really working together with public agencies to save and improve public transit. Next slide, please. So here you can just see, when you get to the next slide, you'll see some of the members of our growing coalition that is working together, advocating to sustain transit operation funding and grow ridership. As you know, this has been a hard few years for public transit. So we're going to talk a little bit about kind of where we are and what some of the challenges are that we're facing. And Adina will talk more about some of the pathway forward. Next slide, please. It should come as no surprise that transit ridership was really decimated by the pandemic. There has been persistent remote work for many people in the Bay Area because a lot of our economy was able to shift to remote work. And what that has meant is that, even though the shelter in place orders lifted a long time ago, ridership has really remained very low compared to pre-pandemic levels. What that looks like is basically transit ridership is at 55% of pre-COVID levels. That's even lower than the national average. So nationally, the recovery ratio is about 70%. So we're actually the furthest behind in the nation in our transit recovery. Next slide, please. I think this is basically showing largely the same thing, that our ridership recovery is at kind of roughly, you can tell by that our ridership remains low. It's also been really uneven. There has been steady growth, but when there are new variants, of course, that takes a toll. Next slide, please. So this is another way, I think, of describing this information, that our ridership remains low. I think one of the things that's really important to highlight is the importance of San Francisco's downtown in our overall ridership trajectory. So pre-pandemic, 70% of all transit trips in the Bay Area started or ended in San Francisco. So, you know, obviously local trips and other types of trips are incredibly important to our overall system. But you know, the majority of our trips either started or ended in San Francisco. So the state of downtown San Francisco is highly correlated with activity on transit, particularly for commute-oriented trips. And again, this is showing that the Bay Area remains much lower in terms of our downtown recovery than other regions in the country. Next slide, please. And, you know, despite the rise in remote and hybrid work, you know, people are still traveling throughout the region and need to get places. And when they are traveling, more often than not, they are traveling by car. So this slide is showing that traffic is actually back and often worse than pre-pandemic levels. So everywhere you see a red dot and the dark red dots, you'll see that transit has returned. I'm sorry, that traffic has returned or is worse than pre-pandemic levels. That is particularly true in spots in San Mateo County and the South Bay, as you can tell by how many red dots there are on this right slide. Next slide, please. And as our previous speaker mentioned, that federal relief money is running out. So we were lucky enough to receive generous but finite funding from the federal government early on in the pandemic. The federal government is usually in the business of funding capital projects, so infrastructure projects, but not actually providing funding to run the buses and the trains and the ferries. That money has typically come from fares, so the price you pay when you buy a ticket, as well as other local sources of revenue, such as sales tax revenue or other sources. Since those are down and federal relief funding is running out, we are headed towards what we're referring to as a fiscal cliff. Next slide, please. And it's not just the Bay Area. Actually, there was a study done by UCLA that found that over 70% of transit agencies in the state are anticipating shortfalls once their federal COVID relief dollars dry up. However, it is going to hit the Bay Area soonest and hardest, and that's because pre-pandemic, many of our transit agencies, especially BART, Caltrain, and Muni, really relied on fares to pay for operating dollars. For instance, BART, 70% of their operating budget came from fares and other local owned sources. That's obviously down. And in many ways, the Bay Area is a bit of a canary in the coal mine for the rest of the state. Like I said, we are going to be hitting these challenges soonest and the hardest because of our business model and the way we funded transit previously, but it actually is a statewide issue. Next slide, please. And so if nothing changes in our financial environment for transit, we are headed towards a fiscal cliff. And that is really a problem because once we start having financial challenges, we're able to offer a lot, or transit agencies run the risk of sort of slipping into what we call a death spiral of service cuts, ridership losses, disrepair, and being a lot less useful. And obviously this outcome would really be devastating to you and to me, and a tremendous blow to our regional and state policy goals for the climate, for equity, for health, and for housing. And, you know, I think it would really undo decades of investment and effort to really improve the state's transit network and the region's transit network if this were to happen. Now, this slide is really showing a portrait of need over the next 5 years. This comes from the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. So this coming year, fiscal year 23-24, we have about an $80 million shortfall. And that will grow to, you know, upwards of $810 million a year in the out years. That is just for the Bay Area. So there is another similar kind of projection for other agencies throughout the state. But what this is basically a cumulative $2.9 billion projected need over 5 years to operate transit. Next slide. So I talked about this just a moment ago. This is just a picture showing that transit death spiral, that without enough funding, you have to cut service, and then it's less useful to riders, and then fewer people ride it. So you have even fewer revenues, and on it goes into a really vicious cycle that we're trying to avoid. Next slide, please. And, you know, our organizations firmly believe that public transportation and great public transportation, not just any public transportation, is really essential to addressing many of California's most pressing challenges. So it's really important, not, you know, to us for so many reasons. It's really the thing that so many of our state goals and regional goals are resting on. Next slide, please. It's also really important, I want to highlight this, for social equity. So based on 2021 census data, almost 60% of California residents who actually commute via transit have a household income of below $35,000. The portrait of transit riders has also really grown more stark during the pandemic. Particularly the racial and economic differences, especially for bus riders, have become starker during the pandemic. And that's who we really need to be thinking about as we recover and as we kind of redesign transit for the future. And so I think, you know, and it's also something we really need to be thinking about if we end up in a scenario where transit doesn't have enough money and has to cut service. It's going to harm the most disadvantaged people in our region and our state. Next slide, please. Again, it's also really essential for climate. I'm not going to go too much into here, but, you know, we're at this moment where the state has really lofty goals for transportation, particularly public transit. Over 40% of our emissions, our carbon emissions and greenhouse gas emissions come from transportation, and the majority of that comes from cars. And so, you know, of course, electric vehicles, which you hear a lot about, are part of the solution, but actually part of the solution is that we also just need to drive less, and public transit is really important for that. And so we really need the state to have its budget match its values. Next slide, please. And I want to take a moment with this. I think it's really important to acknowledge that we've actually been here before. It wasn't that long ago that We had a really robust bus system and light rail cable car system in the East Bay, for instance, the Key system you might have heard of, or a really robust yellow car trolley network and bus network in Los Angeles, both of which pretty much disappeared. And we're spending a lot of money to try and get a shadow of it back, but it still does not compare to anything that we had 50 to 100 years ago. And I think it's really important to learn from our history and not repeat past mistakes. And I would bet that a lot of the decision makers, if they had to do it again, would have not let transit dwindle away. Next slide, please. So our ask, and I think this is where I'm going to be starting to turn it over to Adina very soon, but our ask as part of this large nonprofit coalition is really threefold. One is that we are seeking operating funding to run buses and trains and ferries so that we can maintain service and not significantly cut service or raise fares. We are also hoping that that will be available over multiple years, not just a 1 year kind of Band-Aid, but multiple years to get us through the next 5 years. As I mentioned, we have that nearly $3 billion cumulative shortfall. And we're also looking for funding for ridership recovery improvements, things that are going to make transit better, more attractive, and that are going to help people who are riding transit today, but also start to show up in improving the quality of transit and bringing riders back and bringing transit ultimately into a place of financial stability. And so that's something that's really important. I think many of the strategies that Supervisor Canepa talked about in terms of the transformation action plan show up in this. And I'm going to be turning it over to Adina to talk a little bit more about that. Thank you.
All right, can you hear me and can you see me?
Yes, we do.
Okay, and can the people on Zoom hear me and see me?
Yes.
Good. All right, fantastic. So thank you so much, Supervisor Canepa, and then Laura, for setting the stage. If you can switch to the next slide. So a very important piece of the campaign to address that fiscal cliff is not only restoring public transportation to the status quo before COVID, but even before COVID, there were ways that the public transportation system was not keeping up to deliver people's needs to move around, the affordability, the needs to have public transportation, support housing and climate goals. And there's a quote that I cannot remember who said, but don't let a good crisis go to waste. So with that really severe impact of COVID, Supervisor Canepa mentioned that the leaders at Metropolitan Transportation Commission, transit agencies, and business, labor groups, and other advocates pulled together a Blue Ribbon Task Force to seek to make public transportation, not only the way that it was before, but better, to be able to achieve those goals. And so what I want to do is to talk about and go into a little bit more depth and color in terms of what these opportunities are, and then some of the regional and local advocacy opportunities that we are going to need to make that happen locally and regionally, in addition to at the state level. So Supervisor Canepa talked about those 27 actions, including integrated fares, service planning, accessibility, and new funding, and a kind of nerdy thing called network management. I'll talk a little bit about what is happening and what we can do. Next slide. So in terms of the integrated fares, one of the challenges that we have here in the Bay Area is that for a trip to be convenient and affordable, it's not enough to have any one agency make changes, because we have 27 different transit agencies all around the region. So if you want to come, the fastest trip from North Fair Oaks to this location in Burlingame might be taking the 296 bus to the Caltrain. But if you try to do that, you have to pay twice. And the connection might not be well timed. And so as part of that transformation action plan includes several initiatives to make that more affordable. One piece is free and reduced price transfers, so that if you are going to someplace in Santa Clara County from San Mateo County, from East Palo Alto to Mountain View or something, you're taking the bus, you, instead of paying twice, you would pay once. And if you take, for example, Samtrans to Caltrain or to BART, you would get your Samtrans fare rebated from the longer trip. So it would be more affordable. And that is expected to be rolling out in 2024, next year, along with the next generation Clipper system. But in order for that to roll out, that needs to be approved by each and every one of the 27 transit agencies, including Samtrans and Caltrain and BART. So in the next year, and this approval is going to happen later this year, so there are going to be opportunities to stand up and say, please do this thing that you agreed on that will be beneficial, affordable, and will help increase that transit ridership. Another improvement is the Bay Pass. So that is a transit pass that works on all of the transit agencies. So right now, for example, you can get a Samtrans bus pass and you can travel on Samtrans for a month, but you can only use Samtrans, and that does not get you onto BART, it does not get you onto Caltrain, it does not get you onto the Transbay bus. And so what the Bay Pass does, next slide, and probably the one after that, this is a pilot for a pass that goes on to all agencies. The first phase of the pilot is serving people living in affordable housing communities, being managed by Mid-Penn Housing, which is based in San Mateo County, but is also serving people in Santa Clara County, Alameda County as well. And it's also serving people in public colleges and universities, where the participants in the pilot include like UC Berkeley, San Jose State University, San Francisco State, and a few more. And it's this first phase of the pilot is going to 50,000 people who used to get a single agency pass. So for example, if someone is living in the affordable housing on Delaware Avenue here in San Mateo, they would get a Samtrans pass. Now they're able to use Samtrans and BART and a Transbay bus if the Transbay bus was running, but that's another story. And what they are finding from this pilot to date, that it started over the summer, is that people who have this pass use public transportation 40% more than before. And this is really providing people with a lot more mobility, and people are using not only the services that they didn't have access to before. So if someone had the Samtrans bus, it's not just that they're using Muni more and BART more, but that they're even using Samtrans more. And so in the situation that Laura was talking about, where transit ridership is down, providing this affordability and convenience is also helping to increase transit ridership. And in a world where white collar commuters may be going into the office, 3 times a week, and we want to increase transit ridership, providing more people with more opportunities to take more trips is really important, and a great benefit to people, and a great benefit to our equity goals and housing goals and climate goals. Next slide, which I think I just talked about, so we can move on some more. So another challenge that a number of people talked about in stories is problems. We have challenges with the bus being slow, which I'll get to in a second, and also having to wait for a transfer, where if you are going from one bus to another bus and you have to sit there and wait. One thing that this region is doing with the leadership of MTC, working with the transit agencies for the first time ever, is doing public transportation planning that's not just one agency at a time, and not only focused, historically, we have focused on capital improvements, on extending a train line, on buying more buses, and those things are good, but the way in the places around the world that have really good, well-coordinated, convenient public transportation systems, they plan starting with service. So if you say, I am in East Palo Alto and I want to get to Redwood City or San Mateo, how frequently do I need to have the service? How does it need to be coordinated? Where do I need to coordinate it? What improvements do I need to make on Samtrans and on Caltrain, or on Samtrans and on BART to make that trip possible and convenient? And we're going to be starting to plan in this way this year and into next year. And there are going to be opportunities to speak up and talk about how, what the needs are that are not being as well served now, and what kinds of improved connections that you would like to see. So there's going to be opportunities for feedback this year into next. Another thing that is part of the Transformation Action Plan is we talked about buses being unreliable, being slow, maybe bunching up so there's two together. Part of that problem is that buses get stuck in traffic. And so there are things that can be done on the roads to be able to have the bus to go through the light, to enable the bus not to get stuck in traffic. And these are things that Samtrans is going to be working on, but there are also decisions that need to be made with Samtrans and the local city. And there's going to be opportunity to speak up at the local city to say, even though it might cause a little bit of inconvenience for someone driving a car, there's 40 people on that bus. And so it is worthwhile to have those 40 people on that bus be able to get through that signal. And so that we're going to have opportunities over the next year or two to work on that. Next slide. And then another piece that is going to be very relevant, here in the next year and the next 2 years. I don't know if anybody here was present. I talked about Caltrain and equity a year or two ago. Caltrain historically has been very expensive, and its ridership has been, more white collar workers, and its schedule was focused on that. Like in the middle of the day, it only comes once an hour, and the weekend it only came once an hour. And it also wasn't very well connected to the bus. And so what Caltrain found out in doing its planning, even starting before the pandemic, was that they were losing out on opportunities for ridership by having this expensive and disconnected service. And they have opportunities to have a greater diversity of riders by being more affordable and better connected. And before the pandemic, this was the right thing to do. And right now, with ridership being down, and it's important to regrow the ridership, it's also even more important to do. It was always important to do so. It's even more important to do so. And so as Caltrain is facing its fiscal cliff, they could say, well, we want more money, so we want to raise the fares and to go backwards. But it's important for them to go forwards and to have a greater diversity of riders. And those decisions are going to be made starting in the next few months. So those are some more things that we'll be able to do to make these happen at the agency level, at the local level, and continuing to support the regional plans at the regional level. Next slide. Next slide again. At the regional level, in addition to having short-term funding to be able to prevent cuts at the state level, The MTC is also working with transit agencies for a potential regional transportation funding measure. And there's going to be planning for that happening this year also. So there are going to be opportunities to speak up and say, we want our region to provide the funding to have frequent service, well-connected service, and affordable service. That planning will be this year for a potential ballot measure in 2026 as things are currently scheduled. Next slide. So on the state budget is the first and really critical, important task that Supervisor Canepa talked about and Laura Tolkoff talked about. So for people that are affiliated with a nonprofit, we have a joint letter. Laura showed the version of the letter that had 120 organizations. We can take more, so you can add your logo to the letter. If you're part of a community organization with people, we have a petition that you can sign. And you can call your legislator on your own. You don't need to wait, but we're also going to be hosting an event later this month where you'll be able to dial in during the day and call your legislative office and say, yes, we absolutely need you to provide funding for transit as part of the state budget. And so that's at the state level. And then to summarize the regional and agency actions, this spring, standing up for Caltrain equity, this summer and fall, putting input into a regional transportation funding measure, and later this year, telling agencies that we need to have those free transfers to please approve them. And then the extra bonus nerdy ask is that in order to be able to get free transfers and keep them, we shouldn't need to have 27 agencies have to approve things every single step of the way. And there are ways to make those decisions in a more stable fashion. And that's another discussion that I can come back and talk about in terms of having that coordinated system be stable on into the future instead of having to fight for it every few months. So with that, we'll be happy to stop and take questions along with the rest of the panelists.
Thank you, Adina and Laura. So I want to just highlight a few things. First of all, Vice Mayor Pappen actually brought us flyers for people who are interested in getting the rebate from the 101 express lanes. So we have those at the end, and you can take them back to your organizations. Hopefully people can use them. There are a lot of opportunities here, a lot of things that are going to happen soon that can make this better. I see a lot of optimism in these conversations, which I'm really excited about. But I think that one of the things Adina was really saying is a little bit of a push from the community will really help. So we will make sure when we send out our follow-up email to everyone who signed up that there are real specifics about how to do those opportunities. But right now, I would love to just turn it back to the panel for questions. Kathy.
Yeah, I'm wondering, I haven't heard it. I love what you're doing. Great stuff that you're moving forward, but I haven't heard anything about transit and how you're going to coordinate that, the whole bottleneck, and how we deal with senior centers that are either providing their own transportation or who are trying to figure out how to get their seniors to transportation.
I'm going to repeat that just for the people on Zoom. I'm going to do the short version, but the question was if you can address both paratransit and transit for seniors.
You want to take that, or so?
Okay, go first.
All right, and can you hear me, or do I need to be closer to just grab that mic? Okay. So one of the elements in the transformation action plan is accessible transportation that is looking at how to make paratransit more convenient and also more integrated. And the advisory body that focuses on that at the regional level is their MTC has a policy advisory council, and that has an equity and access subcommittee, and that has many words, but that is a group that meets once every month or two, and they are getting all of the updates on the next steps of making paratransit better, and that's the place to pay attention, or you will get the first updates and the opportunity to comment.
I guess what I'm hearing
Yeah.
is that the paratransit needs to be integrated into everything you're talking about. And having them off on the side often means that the last piece of the puzzle is put together. And I think the same thing for seniors, as we have senior centers all over the county. We have some that have transportation that they bring in from their own agency. We've got others that are trying to work into the public transit system to get people there. The location of senior centers versus where the bus stops are, all of that kind of integration. I think we have two pieces of the population. I know we have a lot of pieces of the population we have to deal with, but I think two that we need to make sure we're.
All right, and we're supporting an initiative that's working on this and doing some focus groups in the next few months to elevate those needs. So after this, if you share your name, I can make sure that you and anyone that is part of the community is invited to the focus groups to uplift those issues.
Yeah, I just want to say paratransit is essential, right? I mean, it's, so whether it's connecting people, I know we do this via Samtrans, Ready Wheels, connecting people to their senior centers. It's critical. You know, one of the things that, and this is off subject, but it's not off subject, but one of the things that my office has done is we've worked and we've created with other cities in partnership, age-friendly cities. What we realized is, and through the Peninsula Family Services, was allocating money for just seniors to go and get their, whatever, get their nails done, get their groceries. So we were able to provide sort of that on demand for paratransit for seniors. It makes our community stronger and better. I will tell you, and I just want to speak a little bit to what Adina had talked about, and thank her for her leadership on Seamless. Understand this, the way transit operators work now, there needs to be a lot of improvement. That improvement, imagine, you have 27 different operators, and she laid out the case perfectly. You pay one rate, which is $2, then you pay another rate. We are in a community, working class community, where those dollars build up, right? And so we have a system that works. They've done this in Toronto. They've done this in other places. So it's not like we're reinventing the wheel here. But when we make transit easy and accessible for people, that's the right way. Not having to navigate through different transit operators. At the end of the day, we're a region. There isn't a moat between San Mateo County and Santa Clara County. We're all in this together. But the work she's doing and all these advocates in SPUR, this is transformative stuff. And Petra said it really well. Yeah, there's a lot of issues and a lot of problems, but you know what? Whenever there's issues and there are problems, you know what there is? Opportunities. And so any good politician can go on forever. So I'll end it there, okay?
We actually have some questions from the Zoom participants as well. So there's one phone number. Would you like to go ahead and ask your question, the person who's calling in, guessing it's Mike?
Yeah, I think Mike Levin.
Introduce yourself, please.
Yes, so can you hear me?
Oh, hold on a second.
Okay, unmuted.
Okay, now you're unmuted. Go ahead, Mike.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I guess I had one question actually first for Adina, and then I was going to bring up another paratransit issue. When you mentioned the budget, are you talking about adding funds into the budget that are not there now, or increasing it from X to Y? You know, what are we actually asking for the legislature to do, or the governor to do?
Laura or
Sure. I'm happy to jump in. Our request is to fill a gap that will happen once federal funds dry up. So in the Bay Area, that's $2.9 billion or so. That is essentially doesn't have any other we don't have any other way of funding. The federal government is not going to come through. Again, ridership has not recovered to a level where we could replace that funding. And so this is new money that we're asking for from the state to fill a shortfall.
But you're asking for the same amount that you were getting from the feds, then, in other words.
And accounting for inflationary pressures, which are as
Okay.
real for them as they are for us.
Just wanted a ballpark figure. Okay.
Yeah.
That's what all right, then the paratransit issues. One I think was sort of just addressed, which is one seat service that I know the committee is working on, where you can get on in San Jose and get off in Santa Rosa without transferring 4 times and paying additional fare each time, et cetera, et cetera. It does cost the original district or the arrival district, whoever pays for it, a lot more money, but I think that cost can be distributed, over the regions that the trip is developed, and it would be tremendously convenient for people taking longer trips, and instead of it taking all day, it would take an hour or 2. And the second is same-day service, which we've been advocating. I'm on the Paratransit Council since 1997, and we've always wanted to be able to either go meet a friend for dinner or go get some medication at the drugstore or do some shopping and not know about it until you wake up that morning, or sometimes you're feeling sick and you want to go get medical attention, and you have to either take an ambulance or find a friend. So there's a lot of ways that same-day service the lack of it negatively impacts people with disabilities. I'm actually hoping Director Canepa can come up with some brilliant ideas that the previous groups have not yet, but we're not going to stop bringing it up.
What's happening there at a regional level? Assemblymember Wicks has some legislation that is going to be a 2-year bill, but looking at getting better state support as well. So that there may be some state opportunities in addition to regional.
Thank you.
They have a question. Yes. About fast track, you have information about fast track?
Yeah, what we could do is we could provide you the information that you need for fast track, how to apply, and we can circulate it to the.
Well, my question is how after pandemic, fast track is making really expensive to drive to the freeways. Years ago, carpool was free for 2 passengers or more. Now fares are up to, sometimes we drive and we see the fare is $18.
It's on demand. My understanding is.
Where that money goes?
Yeah, it's really good. These the dollars that we get from the tolls, they actually go into investment in infrastructure. So one of the things is whether it's helping transit operators, while it's at the same time, what are we doing on Highway 101, creating some connectivity and making sure that buses are able to flow through, and not just in San Mateo County, but into San Francisco County. So the end of the day is we want to make sure, is it investing money from that into Caltrain? Caltrain is in Samtrans. At the end of the day, we are not doing a good job, and we could do, I think all of us can admit here, we could do a better job in moving people throughout the region. But I think where we're going, and Adina referenced it, we look at the Bay Pass, we look at sort of the innovation that is going to take place. That is really going to enhance and make it easier, the rider experience. So that's what we have to focus on. At the end of the day, it's not about transit operators per se. It's you, the end rider, that is the most important person. And I understand some people don't like the toll lanes. I understand your perspective, but I think because transit has been so sorely underfunded for decades, they need this additional money to make sure that we fund transit appropriately, at least try to catch up. That's the challenge.
Well, but the thing is that, for people like us, it's making our life different, Too expensive. People like high-tech workers, they can pay easily, you know. But for regular people that used to go on carpool for free, it's a pain in the ass, honestly.
Thank
So,
you.
so I really want to know who or where that money goes, as you say.
So
but anyway,
here's, we have some flyers for you about opportunity of how you can get some of that money.
okay.
So we will send those out by email and we will hand you a piece of paper in just a second. Por los que hablan español, que ustedes tienen una pregunta, que si tienen una pregunta, ¿no? ¿Alguien? Okay, let me take Lily and then we'll do the online one and then that's as much time as we have.
The plans for future transit are amazing, and I'm really hopeful for the increased ridership that they'll bring. But I'm really curious that in the meantime, how we can continue to increase ridership, because I think that's still such a vital part of the whole system, is getting people on board now, so that when the better transit comes, it's even more. There's even more people that jump on board.
So I think I'll talk a little bit more about the things like the free transfers and the better signs making the system. So right now, if you are in Redwood City and you want to change from a train to a bus and it's very confusing, like if you're trying to do something for the first time, like if I'm doing that, sometimes I go to the place on the weekend so that I can practice so that I won't like miss my bus because I don't know where to go and take the transfer. So those things that are happening now to make the system easier to use are very important. There also are promotions, and it would be really good for the promotions to be done like not just agency by agency, but all together. You know, where do you want to go? One fun thing, folks may have heard of Bike Month, which grew out of Bike to Work Day. It's a annual celebration of riding a bicycle to say, well, if you haven't thought of riding a bicycle, now's the time. So we have a similar thing called Transit Month, which is in September, which is an opportunity to celebrate and take a new trip, go someplace that you might not have thought of before to get to in September. So those are some more thoughts about promotions to increase transit ridership in addition to the system improvements.
I'm going to take the last question on Zoom. Ezio, go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, I just wanted to say that when it comes to wayfinding, those of us who are blind have seen that what's being done out there just doesn't work for us. It isn't designed so that we can access the information. I would suggest that those who design such systems really need to rethink and be more creative about how that can be done. Perhaps Bluetooth beacons can be used. And also, let's get Clipper cards on to use as a payment on the paratransit. I mean, I'm finding that Ready Wheels is rather reticent to do that. I don't know why, but it seems to me that by 2023, this should already have happened. And of course, the same day rides are important. And just a comment about how do we get people to use transit more? Not everyone can walk the quarter or half mile to the bus stop or Caltrain or use a bicycle. So perhaps the Palo Alto Link experiment in Palo Alto might be an interesting model to see if that might work. Where especially if you're a senior, you just pay $1. And so those are just thoughts that come to mind. I've been on the Caltrain Accessibility Advisory Committee for 25 years. And so I've been commenting on accessibility for many years. Thank you so much for your attention.
So thanks so much for the really important points about the accessibility for blind people and people with other disabilities and the mapping and wayfinding project. There's been quite a lot of pointed advocacy focused on that project to address the needs that you mentioned, and there's going to be a presentation on what that project is doing in RATS. When somebody else is talking, I will look up and find out the date, but that's coming to the advisory committee that I had mentioned in the next month or two, which will be a good opportunity to hear what they are doing and give them some feedback if they are or are not doing the right things for people who are visually disabled and blind.
Let's make sure that digital access is also works well for the blind. It does not, websites and apps are not always friendly to screen readers that we depend on. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And with that, thank you very much to our community members for sharing your experiences, to Supervisor Canepa, to Laura, to Adina, and we look forward to continuing this conversation. We are absolutely going to send you lots of information and a follow-up email so that you know how to get a hold of people. And I hope everybody memorized Supervisor Canepa's phone number so we can call him. He's available for phone calls between midnight and 4 a.m. Go ahead and call him back.
I like Salvadorian. Be careful.
Thank you so much to everyone for being here. We look forward to seeing you at more events.
Thank you.